Now we are discussing approaches, methods of psychology. You know the meaning of psychology. Psychology is study of behavior and mental processes. Any science should be based on measurement and observation. One of the characteristics of science is to establish the relationship between cause and effect in between variables. Psychology as a science should adapt scientific methods like experimental method. Now, the next method is experimental method. In 1879, father of psychology, Wilhelm Wundt, established an experimental psychology laboratory at Leipzig in Germany. So before 1879, psychology was the sub-branch of philosophy. Wilhelm Wundt separated psychology from philosophy. Since 1879, psychology emerged as science. Experimental method was popularized by Wilhelm Wundt. So Wilhelm Wundt called as father of experimental psychology. The word experiment is derived from a Latin word experimentum, which means a test or a trial. In general, in pure sciences, there are so many experiments to know the phenomena. In psychology, as it is dealing with human behavior and mental processes, it requires well-equipped psychology laboratory, experimenter, subject. In psychology, subject means those who participate in the experiment, and variables and psychological tools. So these are the important essentials to conduct an experiment. I will repeat all these points. Essentials of an experiment. First one, well-equipped psychology laboratory. Second one, experimenter. The third one, subject. In psychology, subject means those who participate in the experiment. Unlike other subjects, here subject means those who participate in the experiment. And one more essential for experimental method, psychological tools like intelligence test, personality test, attitude test, interest test, memory test, creativity test. So we require all these psychological tools, verbal test and non-verbal test, paper pencil test and performance test, projective techniques and non-projective techniques to conduct an experiment. Next one, variables. Variables can be classified into three types: independent variable, dependent variable, and intervening variable. In simple terms, experimental method is description and analysis of what will occur under carefully controlled conditions. So it is a method which helps to describe and analyze two important variables, and it helps to establish cause and effect relationship between two variables under controlled conditions. Here controlled conditions means experimental conditions. So experimental method is more scientific method when compared with the introspection and observation. In experimental method, we have to understand the concept of experimental method and essentials of experimental method and variables of experimental method, groups involved in experimental method, and research designs, merits and demerits. So far, we have discussed the concept of experimental method, meaning of experimental method. Experimental method is description and analysis of what will occur under carefully controlled conditions. Here, carefully controlled conditions means experimental conditions. You know the essentials of experimental method. It requires well-equipped psychology laboratory, and it requires experimenter as well as subject, and it requires psychology tools and variables. So next dimension in experimental method is variable. So variable means which has variation. So try to understand, it is very important point with regard to competitive examinations. Variable means which has variation. For example, we can call gender as variation in psychology because gender has variations, male and female. We can call locality as a variable in psychology because it has variation rural and urban. We can call socio-economic status as variable in psychology because it has variation. Very rich, above middle class, below middle class, poor and very poor. So we can call class as a variable because it has variations. 8th class, 9th class, 10th class. So we can call medium as a variable because it has variation English medium and Telugu medium or Hindi medium. We can call intelligence as a variable because intelligence has variation like idiots, imbeciles, morons, dullards, average, superior, very superior and gifted. So variable refers to an event or process which can be changed. Variables can be classified into three types. The first one is independent variable, second one is dependent variable, and the third one is intervening variable. Try to understand the differences between independent variable and dependent variable. Independent variable is input variable in the experiment. Dependent variable is output variable in the experiment. Independent variable is the stimulus of experiment. Dependent variable is the response of the experiment. Independent variable is cause of the experiment. Dependent variable is the effect of the experiment. Independent variable influences another variable in the process of the experiment, and dependent variable, as the name says, dependent variable depends on independent variable. So variables can be classified into three types: independent variable, dependent variable and intervening variable. The differences between independent variable and dependent variable is very simple. The variable which is introduced by experimenter is called independent variable. The variable which is influenced by independent variable is called dependent variable. In simple terms, stimuli of the experiment or stimuli that is introduced by experimenter is called independent variable. Responses of the individuals or responses of the subject towards the stimuli which was introduced by experimenter is called dependent variable. And intervening variable. All the factors which includes physical factors, social factors, psychological factors that influence individual except independent variable is called intervening variables. Intervening variables means all the factors that affect the individual except independent variable. In simple terms, physical factors, social factors, psychological factors that influence dependent variable in the process of the experiment except one under the consideration, it is called independent variable. So very simple, intervening variable means all the variables that affect the dependent variable except independent variable called as intervening variables. In simple terms, physical factors like climate, psychological factors like motivation, needs, instincts, emotions, and social factors like family, locality, school, mass media. If all these factors influences dependent variable in the process of the experiment, it is called intervening variables. I will give some examples to understand all these three variables. Sometimes a question lies like this. An experimenter wanted to study the impact of rewards on the motivation of the students. Here rewards are option 1 independent variable, option 2 dependent variable, option 3 intervening variable, option 4 dyeo variable. In general, there are three variables. So you have to understand these three variables so that you can answer any type of question. The question may be knowledge type question or understanding type question or application type question. So this is very important course because in regular coaching what happens, you can listen class only one time. Whereas in online coaching, you can listen this class number of times. If you are not getting the concept, you can listen these classes by repeating the video, and you can read the material and you can practice the bits. So your duty is, if you like all these video lectures, try to pass this information to your B.Ed classmates and your D.Ed classmates and teacher job aspirants, so that they will be benefited. And our Emily Academy, Dr. Moses Emily YouTube channel and app may be propagated to a number of students across state and country. Now I will give some examples to independent variable, dependent variable and intervening variable. An experimenter wanted to test the impact of rewards on the motivation of the students. Here, rewards called as independent variable, motivation of the student is dependent variable. Motivation of the students is influenced by so many factors apart from rewards. So all these factors like fatigue of the students and needs of the students, family factors called as intervening variables. Try to understand what is independent variable. Independent variable is the stimulus of the experiment. Dependent variable is the response of the experiment. Independent variable is the input variable. I for input. Independent, the first letter is I. Input means the first letter is I. Independent variable is input variable and dependent variable is called output variable. In simple terms, the variable or stimulus which is introduced by the experimenter in the process of experiment is called independent variable. The variable which is influenced by independent variable is called dependent variable. So here, rewards influence motivation of the students. So reward is independent variable, motivation is dependent variable, but motivation is not only depends on rewards but also so many factors like physical factors, social factors, psychological factors. All these factors called as intervening variables. I will give one more example. An experimenter wanted to know the impact of salary on the job satisfaction of the teachers. Here two variables are there. Impact of salary on job satisfaction of the teachers. So here the stimulus is salary and response is job satisfaction. So here salary can be called as independent variable and job satisfaction of the teachers called as dependent variable. And what is intervening variable? Job satisfaction is not only depends on independent variable salary but also so many factors like psychological factors of the individual like attitude, social factors of the teacher like school, and physical factors of the teacher like climate called as intervening variables. One more example. A teacher wanted to know the impact of project method on the learning of the students. Here two terms are there, project method and learning. So by using common sense, so which can be influenced another? Project method can influence learning of the students. So project method is dependent variable, learning of the student is dependent variable. Learning is not only depends on project method but also so many factors are there, psychology factors like intelligence, perception, sensation, fatigue, mental health, physical health, emotions of the students, and pedagogical factors like curriculum, teaching learning material, and environmental factors like family, school, mass media. All these factors that can influence learning apart from project method. So experimenter should control all these intervening variables to know the cause and effect relationship between project method and learning. So in this example, project method is independent variable, learning is dependent variable, and all the factors including climate, school, family, fatigue, motivation of the students called as intervening variables. I will give one more example to understand all these variables. A teacher wanted to know the impact of intelligence on the achievement of the students. Here two terms are there, intelligence and achievement. So you can use your common sense. Intelligence means cause, achievement here is effect. Intelligence is input variable, achievement is output variable. Intelligence is the stimulus of the experiment and achievement is response of the experiment. So we can call intelligence as independent variable and achievement is dependent variable. Achievement means marks of the students. Achievement is not only depends on intelligence. Achievement means marks of the students. Achievement not only depends on the intelligence but also so many factors like teaching, family, socio-economic status, mental health of the students, and attention of the students, retention of the students, and climatic conditions. All these factors called as intervening variables. So the experimenter should control all these intervening variables in order to establish cause and effect relationship between intelligence and achievement. So here intelligence is independent variable, achievement is dependent variable, family of the students, climate, and school facilities are intervening variables. An experimenter wanted to know the impact of socio-economic status on moral values of the students. Here, socio-economic status is independent variable. Moral values of the students called as dependent variable. Moral values not only depends on socio-economic status but also other factors like nurturing in the family, intelligence of the students. So nurturing of the family, intelligence of the students are intervening variable. Socio-economic status is independent variable and moral values of the students is called dependent variable. In experimental method, there are two groups, experimental group and control group. So try to understand experimental group, the group which is exposed to the experiment. Very simple. Psychology is not a rocket science or it is not a computer science. Most of the concepts are related to our personal life, what we observe in day-to-day life situations. So you require a professional teaching. Without teacher you cannot understand methodology, pedagogy and psychology. You are very lucky to have Emily Educational Academy platform to listen all these classes. Definitely you will get good marks in CTET examination, TET examination, as well as you will get teacher job through teachers recruitment test as TGT, PGT, primary school teachers in Kendriya Vidyalaya, Navodaya Vidyalaya, Sainik schools, army schools, railway schools, KGBV, Kasturba Gandhi Balika Vidyalaya, and other residential schools and local body schools. Your task is just listen my classes, try to listen 2 or 3 videos daily. So within 40 days you will complete the entire course. By repeating this course, you can command over all these concepts and practice the bits which I have given in this app. So in experimental method, there are two groups, experimental group and control group. Experimental group means the group which is exposed to the experiment. Control group means the group which is not exposed to the experiment, which is kept under controlled conditions, called as control group. For example, an experimenter selected two groups, A group and B group. A group is exposed to the experiment, B group is not exposed to the experiment. Here A group is experimental group, B group is a control group. I will give one more example. A teacher wanted to know the impact of project method on learning of the students. There are two sections, A section and B section. A section students are taught by project method and B section students are taught by conventional methods like lecture method. Here A group is called experimental group, B group called as control group. In simple terms, there are two groups in experimental method, experimental group and control group. Experimental group, the group which is exposed to experiments, whereas control group means the group which is not exposed to the experiment. Very simple. So far we have discussed meaning of experimental method, essentials of experimental method, variables in experimental method, groups in experimental method. Next topic, research designs. There are three methods of research designs. The first one is one group test. Second one is controlled group method or parallel group method or two group method. And the third one is rotation group method. So there are three methods in research design. The first one is one group test or one group method. Second one is two group method or controlled group method or parallel group method. And the third one is rotation group method. And what is one group method? Very simple. In one group method, only one group is involved. The same group is exposed to experimental conditions as well as controlled conditions. So, experimenter, by analyzing pre-test and post-test results, he can come to the conclusion. Very simple. A teacher wanted to know the impact of project method on the learning of the students. So, before introducing project method, which means controlled conditions, he analyzed the results of the students. And after using project method, he will analyze marks and results of the students. Here, one group is exposing to both conditions, experimental conditions as well as controlled conditions. So, this research method is called one group method. Next method in experimental research, two group method or parallel group method or controlled group method. In two group method or parallel form method or controlled group method, two groups are involved with homogeneous characteristics, with same characteristics. So in two group method, two groups acted in the process of experiment as controlled group as well as experimental group. By comparing the results of these two groups, experimenter may come to the generalization. I will give one example. A teacher wanted to know the impact of project method on the learning of the students. He has selected two groups, A section students and B section students. A section student is exposed to project method, which means experimental group, and B group is not exposed to project method, which means control group. By comparing marks and results of these two groups, experimenter may come to the conclusion. It is called two group method. In one group method, only one group is exposed to experimental and control conditions, whereas in two group method or parallel group method or control group method, two groups are involved with homogeneous characteristics. One of the groups is exposed to experimental condition and the second group kept under control, which is not exposed to experiment. So in two group method, two groups are involved. And the third one is rotation group method. In rotation group method, two groups are involved with homogeneous characteristics, A group and B group. So the experimenter conducts experiments in several times. For example, in first situation, he selects A group as experimental group, B group as control group. In second situation, he may change the group or he may rotate the group. So experimental group should act as control group and control group should act as experimental group in second situation. So by changing these two groups as experimental group and control group, investigator analyze the results. So it is more reliable research method when compared with other methods because we can conduct test number of times to know the reliability. So in rotation group method, two groups are involved and these two groups are exposed to both conditions, experimental conditions and control conditions in number of situations, in number of experiments. So based on number of experiments, by using these two groups as control group as well as experimental group, the investigator come to the conclusion. So what is the difference between two group method and rotation group method? In two group method, one of the groups has chance to participate in the experiment, whereas in rotation group method, two groups have chance to participate in the experiment.